The silence was absolute, no static, no ghost signal, just the void where Captain Ethan Reyes' voice should have been. Across the bridge of the UNES Valiant, every console glowed red with failed transmission icons, and the crew's breathing came shallow and fast. Outside the viewport, the Krell warship Dusk Talon loomed like a predator, its segmented hull pulsing with bioluminescent threat displays. Reyes pressed his palm against the dead comms panel, feeling the faint vibration of the enemy jamming field thrumming through the bulkhead. They'd cut him off from command, from the fleet, from everyone except the 47 souls standing watch beside him. He looked at Ensign Myra Chen, whose knuckles were white on the edge of her console, then at Lieutenant Kowalski, who met his gaze with a grim nod. The Krell had silenced them, laughed through the static before the jamming kicked in, their chittering voices mocking the destroyer's distress calls. But Reyes felt something tighten in his chest, not fear, but the cold certainty of a man who'd learned long ago that silence could be a weapon too. The Valiant hung in the debris field like a wounded animal, her port thrusters sputtering irregular bursts of plasma that did nothing to mask the gaping wound in her flank. Reyes stood at the command chair, fingers drumming a silent rhythm against the armrest while damage reports scrolled across his visor. Hull breach on Deck 7, life support at 62%, railgun capacitors offline. The litany of failures was almost meditative in its horror. "Captain, they're hailing us again," Chen said, her voice cracking on the last word. She was 23, fresh from the academy, and this was her first engagement. Reyes had promised her a quiet patrol mapping asteroid clusters near the outer rim, the kind of duty that looked good on a resume without requiring anyone to die. The Krell had other plans, he nodded. Put it through, audio only. The bridge speakers crackled, and then came the laughter, wet, clicking sounds like claws scraping glass. A translator matrix struggled to parse the Krell dialect, but the mockery needed no translation. Words bled through in broken English. Human vessel communication null, surrender or join void dead. More laughter, sharper this time, and then the channel cut. Kowalski slammed a fist against his console. "They're toying with us. They're doing worse than that," Reyes said quietly. He pulled up the tactical overlay, highlighting the Dusk Talon's position 3 kilometers off the starboard bow. The Krell cruiser was twice the Valiant's mass, its hull bristling with torsion cannons and boarding spikes. Around it, a swarm of smaller craft circled like insects, each one a potential boarding pod. "They've jammed every frequency we've got, quantum entanglement, laser link, even the old radio bands. We're ghosts to the fleet. Can we break through?" Chen asked, her hands hovering over the comms array, not with their scramblers active. Reyes zoomed in on the enemy ship's ventral section where a cluster of antenna arrays pulsed with synchronized light. "That's their jamming core. Adaptive frequency spread, military grade. They're not just blocking us, they're learning our patterns, countering every attempt before we even transmit." Myra's face paled. "So we're cut off," Reyes finished. He looked around the bridge, meeting the eyes of each crew member in turn. "But that doesn't mean we're out." The Valiant shuddered as something clanged against the hull, a magnetic grapple, followed by the screech of metal on metal. Red lights flashed along the bulkheads and a proximity alarm wailed. Kowalski pulled up the internal sensors, his expression darkening. "Boarding spikes, 3 contact points, decks 4, 6, and 9. Reyes felt his jaw tighten. The Krell didn't just want to destroy the Valiant, they wanted to gut her, strip her databases, take prisoners for their breeding pits. It was their way, methodical, cruel, efficient. He'd read the reports from the colonies they'd hit, the ones where survivors came back broken and hollow-eyed. "Seal all access corridors," he ordered. "Evacuate non-combatants to the core, arm whoever's left with whatever we've got." "Captain, we've got maybe 30 rifles and half that many people trained to use them," Kowalski said. "Against Krell shock troops, then we make them count." Reyes stood, pulling his sidearm from its holster, a battered M7 kinetic pistol, the kind that predated plasma tech by decades. It was reliable, simple, and it didn't need a power cell. "I want every choke point mined, every airlock rigged to blow. If they want this ship, they're going to pay for every meter." Chen's hands moved across her console, rerouting bulkhead controls and arming emergency protocols. "What about comms? We can't just—" "We can," Reyes interrupted. He moved to the auxiliary station, fingers flying over the interface. "We can't talk out, but we can still listen. That jamming field, it's a two-way barrier. They're not just blocking us, they're isolating themselves too." Myra frowned. I don't understand. Reyes smiled, though there was no warmth in it. They think they've won because we can't call for help, but they've also cut themselves off from their own command net. That cruiser out there, it's operating blind just like us. Kowalski's eyes widened. You're thinking of hacking them, not thinking, doing. Reyes pulled up the Valiant's cyber warfare suite, a relic from the early days of the human-Krell conflict. It was outdated, slow, and half the modules were corrupted from the hull breach, but it was all they had. The Krell use bio-integrated systems, wetware mixed with silicon. It's fast, adaptive, but it's also vulnerable. Their ships are living things, and living things can be infected. Chen leaned forward, her fear giving way to something sharper. You want to upload a virus? Better than that. Reyes began typing lines of code scrolling across his visor. I want to take their voice. The first Krell broke through on Deck 6, tearing the airlock door apart with claws and plasma torches. Corporal Hayes, a wiry woman from the engineering crew, met them with a jury-rigged mining charge and a prayer. The blast vaporized the first 2 boarders and sent the rest reeling, their chitinous armor cracked and weeping ichor. Hayes didn't wait. She emptied her rifle into the gap, each kinetic round punching through carapace and flesh before the Krell could rally. Reyes heard the firefight over the shipwide channel, Hayes' voice tight and controlled. Deck 6 secure, for now. Fall back to the secondary junction, Reyes ordered. Don't let them establish a beachhead. On Deck 4, it went worse. The Krell came through in a swarm, their shock troops moving with terrifying coordination. Ensign Park and his team managed to hold them at the first intersection, but the aliens flanked through a ventilation shaft and tore into the defenders from behind. Park's last transmission was a scream, cut short by static. Kowalski's face was grim as he updated the tactical map. We've lost Deck 4, they're consolidating there, probably setting up a command node. Reyes nodded, forcing himself to stay focused. Every death was a weight on his chest, but grief was a luxury he couldn't afford. How long until they reach the core? 15 minutes if they move fast, 20 if we slow them. Then we slow them. Reyes turned to Chen. Where are we on the hack? Myra's fingers danced across the comms console, her face bathed in blue light from the holo display. I've isolated their jamming frequency and piggybacked a probe onto their carrier signal. It's crude, but it's in. The problem is their firewalls, biological immune responses mixed with quantum encryption. Every time I try to breach, their system adapts and shuts me out. Reyes moved beside her, studying the flow of data. The Krell network was a tangled mess of neural pathways and code, pulsing with alien logic, but there were patterns, repetitions, places where the system grew sluggish or overconfident. Here, he said, pointing to a cluster of nodes near the cruiser's bridge. That's their command hub. If we can inject a payload there, we bypass the firewalls entirely. That's also their most defended sector, Myra said. One wrong move and they'll trace us back, fry our systems. Then we don't make a wrong move. Reyes pulled up a secondary terminal, splitting his attention between the hack and the battle raging through his ship. Upload the worm I coded. It's designed to mimic Krell biosignatures, should buy us a few seconds before they notice. Myra hesitated, then nodded. Uploading now. The data stream shifted, the probe boring deeper into the Krell network. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the display flickered and a cascade of green indicators lit up across the console. Reyes felt his pulse quicken. They were in. But on Deck 6, Hayes' voice crackled through the channel, strained and desperate. They're coming through the walls. I need backup. The transmission cut. Reyes closed his eyes, breathing once, twice. Then he opened them and kept working. The worm burrowed through the Krell cruiser systems like a parasite, replicating and adapting as it went. Reyes watched the progress bar inch forward, each percentage point a small victory against the suffocating dread in his chest. Around him, the bridge crew worked in silence, their movements sharp and efficient. No one spoke unless necessary. Words felt too fragile. On the tactical map, the Krell were advancing through Deck 7, moving toward the Valiant's reactor. If they reached it, they could overload the core or, worse, take control of the ship's power grid. Either way, the Valiant would die. Reactor defenses? Reyes asked. Automated turrets online, Kowalski said, but they're low on ammo, maybe 3 minutes of sustained fire. Make it count. Reyes turned back to the hack. The worm had reached the Krell command hub, but the final breach required manual input, a sequence of commands that would crack the bioencryption and give them access to the cruiser's comms array. His fingers hovered over the keys, mind racing through scenarios. One mistake, and they'd lose everything. Myra's voice broke his focus. "Captain, I'm picking up a transmission. It's internal, Krell to Krell." Reyes frowned. "Put it through." The bridge speakers hissed, and then came the alien voices, sharp, guttural, punctuated by clicks and snarls. The translator struggled, but fragments came through. "Human vessel crippled, boarding proceeding, prisoners for breeding stock ship to be stripped." Kowalski's hand clenched into a fist. "Bastards." Reyes felt the anger rise, hot and sharp, but he pushed it down. Anger was fuel, not guidance. He focused on the hack, on the final sequence. 3 more commands, 2, 1, the display flashed green. They were in. "Access granted," Myra said, her voice barely a whisper. "We're in their comms network." Reyes exhaled slowly. "Can we broadcast?" "Yes." "But the moment we do, they'll know we've breached them. They'll counterattack, trace us back, maybe blow our entire system." "Let them try." Reyes opened a new channel, pulling up the audio interface. "Patch me through to their bridge, all channels, ship-wide." Myra's eyes widened. "Captain?" "Do it." She hesitated, then complied. The connection clicked open, and Reyes felt the weight of the moment settle over him like a cloak. He leaned into the microphone, his voice steady and cold. "This is Captain Ethan Reyes of the United Earth Naval ship Valiant. To the Krell commander aboard the Dusk Talon, I know you're listening. I know you think you've won. You jammed our comms, crippled our ship, sent your soldiers to butcher my crew." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "But you made a mistake." On the tactical display, the Krell forces faltered, their advance slowing. Reyes imagined them hearing his voice through their own speakers, the confusion rippling through their ranks. "You silenced us," he continued, "but silence works both ways. You've cut yourselves off from your fleet, from your command, from any hope of reinforcement. You're alone, just like us. And now I'm going to take your voice too." He nodded to Myra, who executed the next command. The worm activated its final payload, overriding the Krell comms array and locking it into a broadcast loop. Every speaker on the Dusk Talon began echoing Reyes' words, repeating them in a distorted chorus. The Krell couldn't shut it off, couldn't drown it out. Their own ship was speaking against them. "You wanted to break us," Reyes said, his voice filling the enemy bridge. "But humans don't break, we adapt, we endure, and we never ever surrender." The comms channel erupted with Krell voices, shouts, commands, panic. Myra's console lit up with countermeasures, but the worm held, burrowing deeper and locking the override in place. Reyes smiled. "Now get the hell off my ship." The Krell commander's voice cut through the chaos, a guttural snarl that the translator rendered as, "Terminate intrusion, kill the source." Breach their core, but the damage was done. The Valiant's hack had spread through the Dusk Talon's systems like wildfire, corrupting navigation protocols and life support subroutines. On the cruiser's bridge, alarms wailed as bulkheads sealed randomly and artificial gravity flickered. The Krell crew scrambled to regain control, but every fix triggered a new failure. The worm had been designed not just to disrupt, but to learn, adapting to their countermeasures and exploiting weaknesses faster than they could patch them. Reyes watched the chaos unfold through the hacked feeds, his jaw set. "Myra, can you access their airlock controls?" She nodded, fingers flying. "I've got partial access. Their biosystems are fighting me, but I can override individual locks for maybe 30 seconds before they compensate. That's all we need." Reyes pulled up the boarding party's location. 47 Krell soldiers spread across decks 4, 6, and 7, digging deeper into the Valiant's guts. "Kowalski, I need a path. Where can we funnel them?" The lieutenant studied the schematic, his eyes narrowing. "Cargo Bay 2. It's near Deck 7, large enough to hold them all, and it's got an external airlock. If we can lure them in, then we vent them." Reyes' voice was flat, devoid of emotion. He'd made this kind of call before during the siege of Titan Station. "It never got easier. Open all corridors leading to the bay, make it look like a retreat." Kowalski relayed the orders. Across the ship, bulkhead doors hissed open, creating a clear path from the Krell positions to the cargo bay. Automated turrets powered down, their targeting lasers going dark. To the boarders, it would look like the Valiant was collapsing, her defenses crumbling, and they took the bait. The Krell surged forward, their shock troops moving in tight formations. They cut through the remaining resistance on Deck 7, their claws slick with human blood, and poured into the cargo bay like a flood. 47 soldiers, each one a killing machine, confident in their victory. Reyes waited until the last one crossed the threshold. Then he nodded to Myra. "Seal it." The bay doors slammed shut, magnetic locks engaging with a heavy clang. Inside, the Krell realized their mistake, but it was too late. Reyes opened the shipwide channel, his voice echoing through the cargo bay's speakers. "You wanted silence," he said. "Here it is." Myra's fingers danced over the airlock controls. Venting in 3, 2, the external doors blew open and the cargo bay's atmosphere exploded outward. The Krell were sucked into the void, their screams cut short as the vacuum tore them apart. Bodies tumbled through space, freezing and fragmenting, a grim constellation against the stars. On the bridge, no one spoke. Reyes stared at the empty bay, his expression unreadable. He'd saved his crew, but the cost was written in the hollow ache behind his ribs. "Captain," Kowalski said quietly. "The Dusk Talon is pulling back." Reyes looked at the tactical display. The Krell cruiser was disengaging, its thrusters flaring as it retreated to a safer distance. The hack had done more than disrupt their systems, it had shaken their confidence. They'd expected an easy kill, a crippled destroyer too broken to fight back. Instead, they'd walked into a trap, but the battle wasn't over. "They're regrouping," Reyes said. "Once they purge the worm, they'll come back, and we don't have the firepower to stop them." Myra's voice was small. "What do we do?" Reyes didn't answer immediately. He looked at the dead comms panel, at the red icons still glowing like wounds. The jamming field was still active, the Valiant still cut off from the fleet. But the Krell had made a mistake. They'd underestimated human ingenuity, the willingness to fight with whatever scraps remained. And Reyes had one scrap left. The Valiant's reactor hummed beneath Reyes's boots, a low vibration that felt like the ship's heartbeat. He stood in the engine room, surrounded by conduits and coolant pipes, while Chief Engineer Ortiz explained the plan with grim determination. "We can overload the plasma coils," Ortiz said, gesturing to the glowing cylinders along the reactor's core. "Redirect all power to the forward railgun. It'll give us one shot, maybe two if we're lucky, but after that the reactor's dead. No power, no life support, no nothing." Reyes nodded. "How long to charge?" 5 minutes, but Captain, even if we hit them, the Dusk Talon has redundant shielding. "One railgun shot won't be enough to." "It will if we aim for the right spot." Reyes pulled up the Krell cruiser's schematic, highlighting the ventral antenna cluster. "That's their jamming core. Take it out and we're back online. The fleet will hear us." Ortiz's eyes widened. "And they'll send reinforcements." "Exactly." Reyes looked at the engineer, then at the rest of the crew gathered in the cramped space. 23 people, all that remained of the Valiant's complement. "I won't lie to you, this is a long shot. We might miss. We might lose power before the fleet arrives, but if we don't try, we're dead anyway. So I'm asking, are you with me?" The answer came not in words, but in the way they moved. Ortiz returning to her console, the gunners heading to the railgun battery, Chen and Kowalski taking their positions on the bridge. They were exhausted, bloodied, and terrified, but they were still fighting. Reyes climbed back to the bridge, his legs heavy with fatigue. The adrenaline that had carried him through the boarding attack was fading, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. But he couldn't stop, not yet. "Reactor charging," Ortiz's voice crackled over the comm. 4 minutes to full power." Reyes took his seat, pulling up the targeting interface. The Dusk Talon hung in space, 2 kilometers away, its hull scarred but intact. He could see the antenna cluster, a tight grouping of biomechanical spires that pulsed with energy. The shot had to be perfect, any deviation and they'd miss entirely. "Myra, can you give me a firing solution?" She nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she worked. "Accounting for drift, rotation, and their shield modulation, I've got it. But Captain, their shields are adaptive. If they detect the railgun charging, they'll reinforce that section." "Then we don't let them detect it." Reyes opened the hacked comms channel, the one still tethered to the Krell cruiser. "I'm going to keep them distracted." He activated the broadcast, his voice once again filling the Dusk Talon's bridge. "Krell Commander, this is Captain Reyes. I'm offering you one chance to withdraw. Leave now and we won't pursue. Stay and I'll make sure your ship becomes a monument to your arrogance." The response came in a snarl of alien fury, the translator barely keeping up. "Human filth, you are dead, your ship is dead." "We will." Yeah, Reyes interrupted. "I've heard it all before. You're tough, we're weak, resistance is futile. But here's the thing, you're still here, still trying to crack us open, and that tells me you're scared." The Krell's voice rose to a screech. "We fear nothing." Then prove it, Reyes smiled, his eyes on the reactor readout. 3 minutes. Come finish us. The Dusk Talon surged forward, its engines flaring. The Krell commander had taken the bait, closing the distance to ensure a kill. But in their rage, they'd overlooked the subtle power fluctuation on the Valiant, the buildup of energy in the railgun's capacitors. 2 minutes, Ortiz said. Reyes' hands moved across the targeting interface, fine-tuning the trajectory. The crosshairs settled over the antenna cluster, the red reticle steady despite the ship's tremors. Hold, he murmured more to himself than anyone else. Hold, the Dusk Talon was a kilometer away now, its torsion cannons charging for the final barrage. Reyes could see the glow of their weapons, the hungry light that promised annihilation. 1 minute, Myra's voice broke. Captain, they're locking onto us if we don't fire soon. Hold. The seconds crawled by, each one an eternity. Reyes felt the weight of every decision, every death, every moment that had led to this. He thought of Park and Hayes, of the crew scattered across the Valiant's decks. He thought of home, a small apartment in Chicago, a niece who'd asked him to bring back a star. 30 seconds. The Dusk Talon filled the viewport, close enough to see the individual scars on its hull. Reyes' finger hovered over the firing stud. 20 seconds. The torsion cannons glowed brighter. Any moment now they'd fire and the Valiant would cease to exist. 10 seconds. Reyes exhaled, his vision narrowing to the crosshairs, the target, the moment. Fire. The railgun roared, a lance of superheated tungsten tearing through space at a fraction of light speed. It struck the antenna cluster dead center and the Krell cruiser's shields flared, then shattered. The spires exploded in a cascade of bioorganic shrapnel and the jamming field collapsed. The Valiant's comms array lit up, every channel flooding with signals. Fleet command, nearby patrols, even civilian broadcasts. They were no longer alone. Reyes keyed the emergency frequency, his voice hoarse. This is Captain Ethan Reyes of the UNES Valiant. We are under attack by a Krell cruiser at coordinates. He rattled off the numbers, watching as the Dusk Talon reeled from the hit. Requesting immediate assistance. Repeat, immediate assistance. The response came within seconds. Captain Reyes, this is the UNES Marathon. We're 3 minutes out. Hold position. Reyes slumped in his chair, the tension draining from his body. Around him, the bridge crew erupted in ragged cheers, their voices raw with relief. Myra was crying, Kowalski laughing, and even Reyes felt the sting of tears at the corners of his eyes. But he didn't let himself collapse. Not yet. Ortiz, how's the reactor? Holding, barely, but we've got maybe 10 minutes of power left. After that, 10 minutes is enough. Reyes looked at the tactical display where the Marathon and her escort frigates were burning hard toward them. The Krell cruiser was retreating, its damaged hull venting atmosphere. They'd won, for now. The Marathon arrived like a hammer from heaven, her broadside cannons lighting up the void. The Krell cruiser tried to flee, but the frigates cut off its escape, herding it into a kill box. Within minutes, the Dusk Talon was a burning wreck, its crew either dead or captured. The jamming field was gone, the threat neutralized. Reyes watched from the Valiant's bridge as medics and engineers swarmed aboard, their voices calm and efficient over the comms. The reactor was stabilized, life support restored, and the wounded evacuated to the Marathon's sickbay. It felt surreal, like waking from a nightmare into a world that was too bright, too loud, too real. Captain, Myra's voice pulled him back. She stood beside his chair, her uniform torn and stained, but her eyes clear. Fleet Command wants a debrief. They're asking how we survived. Reyes smiled faintly. Tell them we got creative. She laughed, a small, broken sound. I'll leave out the part where we nearly died 20 times. Good call. Kowalski approached, his expression somber. Final count, 17 dead, 9 critical. The rest will recover. He paused. We did good, sir. Reyes nodded, though the weight of those 17 names settled heavy on his shoulders. We did what we had to. Over the next hour, the Valiant was towed to a repair dock, her hull patched enough to survive the journey. Reyes walked through the corridors, stopping at each damaged section to speak with the crew. He thanked Ortiz for keeping the reactor alive, commended the gunners for their precision, and promised Myra a commendation. But when he reached Cargo Bay 2, he stopped. The bay was empty now, the venting complete. Through the external windows, he could see the debris field, fragments of Krell armor, frozen blood, the remnants of 47 lives. He'd killed them without hesitation, and he'd do it again if he had to, but that didn't make it easier. Captain. A voice behind him, Admiral Kurtz, the Marathon's commander, stepped into the bay. She was a tall woman with silver hair and a scar across her jaw, a veteran of the early Krell Wars. Hell of a fight. Reyes turned. We got lucky. Luck had nothing to do with it. She gestured to the viewport. You hacked a Krell cruiser mid-battle, broadcast your voice through their own systems, and turned their jamming field into a weapon. That's not luck, that's ingenuity. It's desperation. Kurtz smiled. Sometimes they're the same thing. She handed him a data pad. Fleet Command reviewed your logs. They're calling it a tactical masterpiece. There's talk of a medal. Reyes shook his head. Give it to the crew. They're the ones who earned it. I figured you'd say that. Kurtz's expression softened. For what it's worth, you did right by them, by all of us. Reyes looked at the stars beyond the viewport, at the vast emptiness that had almost swallowed them. We just wanted to go home. You will, soon. Kurtz turned to leave, then paused. One more thing, the Krell we captured from the Dusk Talon, they're saying something strange, claiming you're a voice stealer, some kind of myth in their culture, a predator that hunts in silence. Reyes felt a chill run through him. What does that mean? It means you scared them, badly. She smiled, might want to get used to the name, word's going to spread. After she left, Reyes stood alone in the bay, staring at the debris field. He thought of the Krell commander's laughter, the mockery that had echoed through the bridge. They'd thought silence was their weapon, a way to break the human spirit. But they'd learned too late that silence could cut both ways. Reyes touched the dead comms panel one last time, then turned and walked back to the bridge. The Valiant was battered, bloodied, but still flying. And so was he. 3 weeks later, the Valiant limped into Earth's orbit, her hull scarred and her crew exhausted. Reyes stood on the observation deck, watching the blue curve of the planet below. Somewhere down there, his niece was waiting, probably bouncing with excitement over the star he'd promised her. He pulled a small data chip from his pocket, a holographic recording of the battle, edited down to the moment they'd broken the jamming field. It wasn't a star, but it was something. A story, a reminder that even in the darkest silence, the human voice could still be heard. Myra joined him at the window, her arm in a sling. Ready to go home? Reyes nodded. More than ready. Think they'll let us rest? He laughed. Not a chance. And as the shuttle descended toward Earth, carrying the crew of the Valiant back to solid ground, Reyes felt the weight begin to lift. The silence was over. The voice had returned, and the Krell would remember.